Is it
You
even
got
mine?
fat.
Tell me the truth
Those
right
two
now.
words would cost Dwayne Carroll everything he thought made him a man. Lillian Torres stood frozen at the entrance of Cipriani's, her red Valentino dress hugging the curve of her belly, a small clutch containing her ID and Salvatore's black Amex. Another charity case trying to eat above her pay grade. Dwayne blocked her path, sneering down at her with pure contempt. His voice rose loud enough to silence the sommelier mid-pour. Jesus Christ, Lil. What the hell happened to you? His finger stabbed toward her midsection like an accusation. The clutch nearly slipped from her grip, her breath catching in her throat as champagne glasses froze mid-clink across the dining room. Dwayne stepped closer, invading her space the way he always had, his cologne mixing with the scent of her fear. I leave you for what, a year? And you let yourself go like this? He laughed, loud and performative, playing to the crowd of Manhattan's elite who pretended not to stare. Lillian's hand moved instinctively to her stomach, protective, maternal, shielding the secret growing inside her. The twins kicked as if sensing danger. Have you ever watched a man dig his own grave with his mouth? If this story makes your heart race, show us some love with a like and share it with someone who believes in second chances and drop in the comment where you are watching from. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us hope and love. Inside the private dining room, Dwayne straightened his sports coat and cleared his throat. He had done this dance 100 times before. Charm the room, own the space, remind everyone why he mattered. Confidence always won over class, especially when the target looked like someone he used to own. Gentlemen, Dwayne began, addressing the table of Wall Street bros he'd crashed, his voice smooth and practiced. Sorry for the interruption. Just ran into my ex. You know how it is when they can't let go. He gestured back toward Lillian, now standing near the host stand, a crimson silhouette against white marble. One hand still resting on her belly. One hand gripping her clutch like a lifeline. Girl I used to date. Sweet thing but zero self-control. Looks like she's been hitting the breadbasket pretty hard since I cut her loose. The men at the table exchanged uncomfortable glances, the kind of second-hand embarrassment that comes from watching someone humiliate themselves without realizing it. But Dwayne pressed on, oblivious to the shift in temperature. She kept saying she had a reservation, probably using some sugar daddy's name to get in here. These types always do. From the corner booth near the window, a man in a midnight blue Tom Ford suit sat perfectly still. Salvatore Luciano didn't move, didn't blink, didn't speak, but his fingers stopped rotating the Patek Philippe on his wrist. And the two men flanking the entrance, men Dwayne mistook for regular security, exchanged a glance that would have frozen his blood if he'd noticed. Dwayne was still talking, his voice growing louder, feeding off his own momentum. I mean, look at her. I remember when she actually gave a damn about how she looked. Now she's out here looking like she swallowed a... Mr. Carroll. The voice cut through the room like a blade through silk. Salvatore stood slowly, adjusting his cufflinks with the precision of a man who'd done terrible things with steady hands. The entire restaurant seemed to exhale in unison, conversations dying mid-sentence. Dwayne turned, confused, his smirk still plastered across his face. Yeah. Do I know you? Salvatore's eyes, dark, unreadable, the kind of eyes that had watched men beg, shifted from Dwayne to Lillian, then back. You're standing between me and my fiancée. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Dwayne blinked. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. You're what? Salvatore took 3 measured steps forward. Each one felt like a countdown. When he reached Lillian, he placed his hand on the small of her back, a gesture so possessive and protective it made Dwayne's entire performance look like a child's tantrum. "My fiancée," Salvatore repeated, his voice calm, almost gentle. "The woman carrying my children." Dwayne's face drained of color faster than champagne from a cracked glass. Twins. The word didn't need to be spoken. Lillian's hand on her belly said everything. The sports coat Dwayne wore suddenly felt too tight. The Rolex knockoff on his wrist suddenly felt too heavy. The room suddenly felt too small. Because 30 feet away, near the kitchen entrance, the maitre d' was already on the phone. And the two men by the door were no longer pretending to be regular security. Salvatore leaned in, close enough that only Dwayne could hear him, his voice dropping to a whisper that promised violence without ever threatening it. "You spent a year tearing her down with words. Tonight, I'm going to return the favor with facts." Dwayne's knees trembled. His mouth went dry. And somewhere in the back of his mind, through the haze of panic and expensive whiskey, he realized he'd just mocked a pregnant woman in front of the one man in New York you never ever disrespected. The host approached, tablet in hand, voice professionally neutral. "Mr. Luciano, your table is ready. And Mr. Carroll." She paused, her smile tightening. "I'm afraid there's been a mistake with your reservation." Dwayne tried to speak, tried to laugh it off, tried to do anything but stand there like a man watching his life collapse in real time. But Salvatore had already turned away, guiding Lillian toward their private booth, his hand never leaving her back, his presence filling the space Dwayne had tried to dominate. And as the two men by the door stepped forward, Dwayne finally understood what everyone else in that room had known the moment Salvatore stood up. He'd just humiliated the wrong woman, in front of the wrong man, on the wrong night. But to understand why Salvatore Luciano's protection meant everything to Lillian Torres, you need to know what Dwayne Carroll had spent an entire year destroying. The abuse didn't start with fists. It never does. It started with a comment at brunch, 6 months into dating. Lillian had ordered French toast, and Dwayne leaned back in his chair, coffee cup raised, eyebrow arched. "You sure you need all that syrup, babe? Just looking out for you." She'd laughed it off, set down the bottle, told herself he cared about her health. That's how it begins. Small, wrapped in concern, delivered with a smile. By month 9, he was monitoring her plates. By month 12, he was commenting on her jeans. Those used to fit better, didn't they? By month 15, he stopped touching her in public unless it was to pinch the soft part of her waist and whisper, "We'll fix this." The isolation came next, quiet as carbon monoxide. Her friends became bad influences. Her Thursday yoga class became a waste of time you could spend with me. Her family dinners became obligations you care about more than us. One by one, the pieces of Lillian Torres that existed before Dwayne Carroll were carved away until all that remained was the version he could tolerate. The gaslighting was an art form. When she confronted him about the cruel comments, he'd look wounded. "I never said that. You're remembering it wrong." When she cried, he'd sigh like she was exhausting him. "You're too sensitive. I can't even joke around you anymore." When she tried to leave, he'd switch, apologies, flowers, promises. "I'm stressed. Work's killing me. You know I love you, right?" And she'd stay. Because leaving felt harder than enduring. Because he'd convinced her that her perception of reality couldn't be trusted. Because somewhere deep down, she believed she deserved it. The final night came without warning. It was 2:47 a.m. when Lillian woke to Dwayne standing over the bed, her phone in his hand, his face illuminated by the screen's glow. Who the hell is Marcus? Her coworker. Her gay coworker. Her married gay coworker who'd texted about covering her shift. But explanations didn't matter. They never did. Dwayne's voice rose, sharp and venomous, accusing her of lies she'd never told, betrayals she'd never committed. And for the first time in 18 months, something inside Lillian cracked. Not into pieces, but open. She didn't argue. Didn't cry. Didn't defend herself. She waited until his rage burned out. Until he stormed into the living room and passed out on the couch, drunk on anger and Jameson. Then, at 3:14 a.m., Lillian Torres packed a single suitcase in the dark. No note. No confrontation. No final speech. Just silence. And freedom. Recovery didn't happen overnight. Therapy taught her that abuse rewires your brain, that healing isn't linear, that you can leave someone physically and still carry them in your nervous system for years. Dr. Patel, her therapist, asked questions Lillian had never considered. When did you stop trusting yourself? When did his voice become louder than yours? Slowly, session by session, Lillian rebuilt. She started eating without guilt. She reconnected with her sister. She got a job at a gallery in Soho, something creative, something hers. And then, for months after leaving Dwayne, she met Salvatore Luciano at a charity auction. She'd been serving champagne. He'd been bidding on a Basquiat. When their eyes met, he didn't look at her the way men usually did. Assessing, calculating, consuming. He looked at her like she was someone worth knowing. You hate this job, he said, not as a question. Lillian blinked. Excuse me. The way you hold the tray. Like you're counting the minutes. He smiled, not smug, just observant. I'm Salvatore. Lillian. Lillian, he repeated, testing the weight of her name like it mattered. When does your shift end? She should have said no. Should have walked away. But something in his voice, calm, steady, safe, made her answer honestly. Midnight. I'll wait. And he did. They talked until 3 a.m. in a 24-hour diner. And Salvatore didn't interrupt her once. Didn't correct her. Didn't make her feel small. He listened the way Dwayne never had, like her words carried value, like her thoughts deserved space. 3 months later, they were inseparable. 6 months later, she loved him. 8 months later, she was pregnant. With twins. The doctor's words had hung in the air like a blessing and a curse. Lillian's hand trembled as she gripped Salvatore's, her mind racing through every possible future, every possible danger. No one can know, she whispered that night, curled into his chest. Not yet. Salvatore's arms tightened around her. Why? Because. Her voice cracked. Because if Dwayne finds out, if anyone from that life finds out, they'll use it against me. They'll say I got pregnant to trap you. They'll say I'm not fit to be a mother. They'll. Lillian. Salvatore tilted her chin up, his dark eyes fierce and certain. No one will ever hurt you again. You understand me. No one. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. So she kept the secret close. Wore loose dresses. Declined social events. Protected the life growing inside her the only way she knew how, by making herself invisible. She thought she'd never see Dwayne Carroll again. Thought the city was big enough. Thought enough time had passed. Thought the universe wouldn't be cruel enough to put them in the same room. But fate doesn't care what you think you deserve. And on a Friday night in November at Cipriani's on 42nd Street, Dwayne Carroll walked back into Lillian Torres's life. Only this time, she wasn't alone. This time, she had Salvatore Luciano. And Dwayne had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Salvatore Luciano learned to read men the way most people read headlines. Quickly, accurately, and with an eye for what's hidden between the lines. The moment Dwayne Carroll opened his mouth, Salvatore knew exactly what he was looking at. Abuser. Textbook. Probably emotional, possibly physical. Definitely dangerous. He'd seen this type 1,000 times. The finger-pointing. The public humiliation. The way Dwayne positioned his body to make Lillian feel small. The performative cruelty designed to entertain an audience and reassert dominance. Classic narcissistic control. Predictable as a metronome. From his corner booth, Salvatore sat motionless, his Patek Philippe catching the candlelight as he rotated it once. Twice, a habit that helped him think. His bourbon sat untouched. His steak growing cold. None of it mattered. Because the woman he loved was standing 20 feet away, frozen in a red dress, her hand protectively cradling the twins she carried, while the man who'd spent 18 months destroying her was putting on a show. Salvatore's jaw tightened. But he didn't move. Not yet. In his world, emotion was a liability. Anger made men sloppy. Rage made them reckless. And reckless men ended up dead or worse, imprisoned, humiliated, broken by the very system they thought they could outsmart. Salvatore Luciano had built an empire on the East Coast by following 2 inviolable rules. Rule 1. Never act emotionally. Always act strategically. Emotion was gasoline. Strategy was the match. You needed both, but you controlled when and where the fire burned. Rule 2. Always confirm intent before delivering consequences. Because once you moved, there was no going back. Once you made an example of someone, the message was permanent. So you waited. You watched. You confirmed that they deserved what was coming. And Dwayne Carroll was confirming it beautifully. Salvatore Luciano's name carried weight in New York the way gravity carries mass. Invisible, constant, undeniable. He didn't need to announce himself. He didn't need to threaten. People simply knew. Governors returned his calls. Senators attended his fundraisers. Prosecutors found reasons to look the other way. Not because Salvatore ruled through fear. Any thug with a gun could do that, but because he ruled through respect. He kept his word. He honored loyalty. He protected those under his umbrella with a ferocity that made betrayal unthinkable and allegiance invaluable. But respect had limits. And Dwayne Carroll was testing every single one. Lillian had told Salvatore about Dwayne 3 months into their relationship, her voice quiet, her hands trembling as she described the gaslighting, the isolation, the slow dismantling of her self-worth. Salvatore had listened without interruption, his hand covering hers, his thumb tracing small circles on her wrist. Silent reassurance that she was safe, that she was believed, that she mattered. When she finished, he'd asked one question. "Do you want me to handle it?" She'd shaken her head. "No. I just want to forget he exists." And Salvatore had respected that. Because protecting Lillian didn't mean possessing her. It meant honoring her choices, even when every instinct screamed to find Dwayne Carroll and remind him that cruelty has consequences. So he'd waited. Stayed vigilant. Made sure Lillian never had to be in the same room as her past. Until tonight. Until Dwayne walked into Cipriani's and made that choice for her. Now Salvatore watched. Dwayne's body language told the whole story. The puffed chest. The invasion of personal space. The way he played to the crowd, turning Lillian's pain into entertainment. Classic abuser playbook. Humiliate publicly. Reassert control. Make her feel powerless. Salvatore's fingers stopped rotating his watch. Dwayne was still talking, his voice carrying across the dining room like nails on a chalkboard. Probably using some sugar daddy's name to get in here. These types always do. Sugar daddy. Salvatore's eyes narrowed. I mean, look at her. I remember when she actually gave a damn about how she looked. Now she's out here looking like she swallowed a... The sentence hung unfinished in the air, because Dwayne had just crossed the line from cruel to unforgivable. Mocking a woman's body was pathetic. Mocking a pregnant woman's body was vile. But mocking Lillian's body, the body carrying Salvatore's children, the woman who'd survived Dwayne's abuse and rebuilt herself into someone extraordinary, that was a declaration of war. Salvatore stood slowly, his chair barely making a sound. The shift in energy was immediate. Conversations stuttered. Silverware froze mid-air. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Because when Salvatore Luciano stood, it meant one thing. Someone had just run out of chances. And Dwayne Carroll, oblivious and arrogant, was about to learn what happens when ignorance meets power. Salvatore adjusted his cufflinks with surgical precision. His eyes locked on Dwayne like a sniper acquiring a target. His voice, when it came, was calm, almost polite. Mr. Carroll. No. Dwayne turned at the sound of his name, confusion flickering across his face before morphing into defensive aggression. The look of a man caught off guard but too proud to show it. Yeah. He straightened his spine, puffing his chest slightly. Do I know you? Salvatore didn't answer immediately. He simply stood there, 6 feet of controlled power in a midnight blue suit, watching Dwayne the way a chess master watches an opponent's fatal mistake unfold. The silence stretched too long. Uncomfortable. Pointed. Dwayne laughed. Sharp. Nervous. Compensating. He turned back to his Wall Street audience, gesturing at Salvatore like he was part of the joke. See what I mean? She's already got some suit coming to her rescue. Probably told him she's some kind of victim. He raised his voice, making sure Lillian could hear every word. That's her specialty, by the way. Playing helpless until some guy with a wallet falls for it. A woman at table 6 shifted uncomfortably, her wine glass frozen halfway to her lips. The couple at table 9 exchanged glances, the kind that said, "Should we do something?" before looking away. Nobody moved. This was Manhattan. This was someone else's drama. This was not their problem. Dwayne fed off the silence like oxygen, interpreting non-intervention as permission. Let me guess, Lil, he continued, his voice dripping with manufactured pity. You told him you were independent, self-sufficient, that you didn't need anyone. He laughed again, louder this time. Because we both know that's bullshit. You've never survived a day without a man paying your bills. Lillian's breath caught. Her fingers tightened around her clutch until her knuckles went white. She'd paid her own rent for 8 months, built her own life, earned her own money. But Dwayne's words had a way of rewriting history, making lies sound like truth, making her question memories she knew were real. Don't engage. Don't give him the reaction. Don't. You always needed someone to take care of you, Dwayne pressed on, stepping closer to her now, invading her space with the casual entitlement of someone who'd done it 1,000 times before. That's why you're here, isn't it? Found yourself another mark. Another guy dumb enough to think you're worth the investment. The maitre d' glanced toward the kitchen, hand hovering near her phone. The sommelier busied himself with a wine list, eyes down, professionally invisible. The Wall Street bros at Dwayne's table looked everywhere except at him. At their plates, their phones, the abstract art on the walls. Complicit through silence. This was America. This was bystander culture perfected. This was watching a car crash and hoping someone else calls 911. Lillian's voice, when it finally came, was barely above a whisper. Please. The word hung in the air, fragile as glass. Please just leave. Dwayne's eyes lit up. He'd been waiting for this. The moment she broke, the moment she begged. This was the dynamic he understood, the power structure he craved. Victim and victor. Weak and strong. Broken and whole. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to that intimate, vicious tone he'd perfected over 18 months. There she is. There's the Lillian I remember. All that confidence you were faking. Gone. He snapped his fingers near her face. You'll always be that scared little girl who needed me to tell her she mattered. Lillian flinched. Not from fear. From the muscle memory of 1,000 moments just like this one. Moments where Dwayne's words became weapons, where her voice disappeared, where the world shrunk to the size of his cruelty. But this time something was different. This time she wasn't alone. The sound of a chair moving was almost imperceptible. But the effect was seismic. Salvatore Luciano rose to his full height, slow and deliberate, the way apex predators move when they've decided the hunt is over. Every eye in the restaurant turned. The sommelier's hand stopped mid-pour. The Wall Street bros' conversation died mid-sentence. The couple at table 9 sat frozen, forks suspended in mid-air. Because everyone in that room, everyone, suddenly understood that the temperature had changed. That the man in the midnight blue suit wasn't just another diner. That Dwayne Carroll had been playing a game he didn't know he'd already lost. Salvatore adjusted his cufflinks with surgical precision. Took one step forward. Then another. His voice, when it came, was calm. Measured. The kind of calm that precedes violence. You're interrupting my dinner. Dwayne blinked, his smirk still plastered across his face like a mask he'd forgotten he was wearing. And who the hell are you supposed to be? Her lawyer. The Wall Street bros at the table shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a kid who couldn't be older than 25, whispered something to his colleague and reached for his phone, fingers moving fast. Salvatore didn't answer immediately. He simply stood there, hands relaxed at his sides, his presence filling the space between them like water rising in a locked room. I'm the man, he said slowly, deliberately, asking you to step away from my table. Dwayne laughed, but it came out wrong. Too loud. Too forced. The laugh of a man suddenly aware he'd miscalculated but too committed to back down. Your table. Dwayne glanced at Lillian, then back at Salvatore. What, you bought her dinner and now you think you own her? Buddy, I've got news for you. This one comes with baggage. Trust me, I did you a favor by leaving when I did. The maitre d' appeared at the edge of the dining room, tablet clutched to her chest, her eyes locked on Salvatore. Not on Dwayne. On Salvatore. Waiting for a signal. The sommelier moved closer, wine bottle abandoned, his posture shifting from service to security. The two men stationed near the entrance, the ones Dwayne had mistaken for regular personnel, took synchronized steps forward, their suits suddenly looking less decorative and more tactical. Dwayne didn't notice. He was too busy performing. Listen, man to man, Dwayne continued, stepping forward with the false confidence of someone who'd never been held accountable. You seem like a decent guy. You're clearly doing well for yourself. He gestured at Salvatore's suit, his Patek Philippe. So let me save you some time and money. Lillian here? She's great at playing the victim. Great at making you feel like a hero. But the second you stop paying attention, the second you stop funding her little lifestyle. That's enough. Salvatore's voice didn't rise, didn't sharpen. It simply landed. 2 words that carried the weight of absolute authority. Dwayne's mouth hung open mid-sentence. Salvatore closed the distance between them in 3 measured steps. Not aggressive. Not threatening. Just inevitable. He moved past Dwayne like he was furniture. Irrelevant, forgettable, and stopped beside Lillian's chair. When Salvatore placed his hand on Lillian's shoulder, the gesture was gentle. Protective. The kind of touch that said you're safe without needing words. Lillian exhaled, her shoulders dropping an inch as if she'd been holding her breath for the past 5 minutes. Her hand found his, fingers intertwining, a silent thank you passing between them. Dwayne stared at the contact like it personally offended him. Oh, I get it now. His voice rose, regaining false confidence from manufactured outrage. You're sleeping with her. Cool, cool. But you should know what you're getting into, my man. Because Lillian? She's a mess. Emotionally unstable. Probably already starting to show it, right? He gestured crudely toward her midsection. What, you knocked her up already? That how she trapped you? The restaurant went silent. Not the polite silence of earlier. The absolute, suffocating silence of a room holding its collective breath. Lillian's hand tightened on Salvatore's. Not to stop him, but because she knew what was coming. The Wall Street bro with the phone went pale. He stood abruptly, throwing cash on the table, mumbling something about an early meeting. The maitre d' took another step forward, her face professionally neutral but her eyes screaming, "Get out while you still can." Salvatore looked down at Lillian, his expression softening in a way that made Dwayne's cruelty look even more obscene by contrast. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his thumb tracing her cheek with devastating tenderness. Then he turned to Dwayne. "She's not trapped me," Salvatore said quietly, his voice carrying across the silent dining room like a judge delivering a verdict. "She's carrying my twins." The words landed like a bomb. Dwayne's face went through 5 stages of comprehension in 3 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, realization, panic, denial. "You're what?" "My twins," Salvatore repeated, slower this time, letting each syllable sink in. "The children she's been protecting. The family she's been building. The future you'll never be part of." Dwayne's mouth opened, closed, opened again. His eyes dropped to Lillian's stomach, to the curve of the red dress, the protective way her hand rested there, the undeniable evidence he'd been too blind and too arrogant to see. Twins. Not weight gain. Not letting herself go. Twins. And the father was standing 3 feet away, looking at Dwayne like he was a problem that needed solving. The silence in Cipriani's was the kind you could drown in. 50 people holding their breath. 50 people watching a man realize he'd just humiliated the wrong woman in front of the wrong man on the wrong night. Dwayne's face cycled through emotions like a slot machine. Confusion, disbelief, denial, anger, fear, landing finally on desperate, scrambling panic. "You're lying," he said, voice cracking slightly. She's just fat. I know her. I know what she does. She's playing you, man. She's..." "Stop talking." Salvatore's voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through Dwayne's spiral like a scalpel. Dwayne's mouth snapped shut involuntarily. "You don't know her," Salvatore continued, his hand still resting protectively on Lillian's shoulder. "You knew a version of her you spent 18 months destroying. The woman sitting here. The mother of my children? You've never met her." Dwayne laughed. High, manic, the sound of a man whose brain was refusing to process reality. "Twins," he repeated almost to himself. "She's pregnant. You actually." He looked at Lillian, really looked at her for the first time since walking in, seeing the curve of her belly, the protective posture, the evidence he'd mocked without understanding. "How long?" Lillian didn't answer. She didn't owe him anything. Not her story. Not her timeline. Not her words. Dwayne's denial shifted into anger. His comfort zone, his default setting. "You know what? Fine. Great. Congratulations." His voice rose, desperate to regain control of a narrative that had slipped completely out of his hands. "You two deserve each other. Good luck dealing with her crazy. Good luck paying for her shopping addiction. Good luck." Salvatore leaned forward, just an inch, and Dwayne's rant died in his throat. "Here's what's going to happen," Salvatore said quietly, calmly, the way doctors deliver terminal diagnoses. "You're going to leave this restaurant. You're going to delete her number. You're going to forget she exists. And if I ever hear that you've spoken her name, looked in her direction, or breathed the same air as her again." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "You'll learn that public humiliation was the kindest thing I could have done to you tonight." No raised voice. No dramatic threats. No movie villain monologue. Just cold, factual certainty. Dwayne opened his mouth to respond, to argue, to defend, to do anything that would let him salvage some shred of dignity, but the words wouldn't come, because he'd finally seen what everyone else in the room had seen the moment Salvatore stood. The two men who'd been standing near the entrance were now directly behind Dwayne. Not touching him. Not threatening him. Just present. Silent, professional, unavoidable. The maitre d' approached, tablet clutched like a shield, her voice professionally courteous and absolutely final. "Mr. Carroll, I'm afraid there's been a mistake with your reservation. We're going to need you to leave." Dwayne looked around wildly, at the Wall Street bros who wouldn't meet his eyes, at the couple at table 9 who were suddenly fascinated by their appetizers, at the sommelier who was pretending to inventory wine bottles. No backup. No allies. No audience. "This is insane," Dwayne stammered, his voice losing its edge, cracking around the consonants. "You can't just, I didn't do anything wrong. I was just." The man on his left, dark suit, dead eyes, the kind of calm that comes from controlled violence, placed a hand on Dwayne's elbow. Not rough. Not aggressive. Just firm enough to communicate. "This conversation is over. Come with us, sir." Dwayne tried to jerk his arm away, but the grip held. His eyes darted to Salvatore, then to Lillian, searching for something. Mercy, acknowledgement, the power dynamic he'd walked in with. He found nothing. Salvatore had already turned his attention back to Lillian, adjusting her napkin, signaling the waiter for water, treating Dwayne like he'd already ceased to exist. And Lillian. Lillian looked at Dwayne one final time. Not with hatred. Not with satisfaction. Not with anything that would give him the emotional reaction he'd spent 18 months extracting from her. She looked at him with indifference. The most devastating response of all. The two men guided Dwayne toward the exit, not dragging, not forcing, just moving him with the inevitability of a tide. His protests grew quieter with each step. his body language shrinking, collapsing inward. By the time they reached the door, Dwayne Carroll looked exactly like what he was. A small, cruel man who'd finally run out of people willing to tolerate his cruelty. The door closed behind him with a soft click. And Lillian Torres exhaled. Not a sigh. Not a gasp. A full, deep, cleansing breath. The kind you take when you've been holding tension in your body for so long you forgot what oxygen felt like. The first real breath she'd taken in years. The fallout was swift, surgical, and devastating. By Monday morning, Dwayne Carroll's LinkedIn profile was deactivated. By Tuesday afternoon, his desk at the financial consulting firm where he'd worked for 6 years was being packed by HR. By Wednesday, his name was circulating through Manhattan's professional networks with a single, career-ending label: liability. The official reason was behavioral concerns and workplace complaints. The real reason was that 3 women from his office had finally felt safe enough to come forward. Emails he'd sent. Comments he'd made. The pattern of behavior they'd each experienced in isolation but never reported. Until a video surfaced. Someone at Cipriani's had recorded the confrontation. Not all of it. Just enough. Dwayne pointing. Dwayne mocking. Dwayne publicly humiliating a pregnant woman while a dining room full of witnesses did nothing. The video went viral in finance circles within hours. 37 seconds that destroyed a reputation it had taken Dwayne 6 years to build. His gym membership was quietly canceled. His regular table at his favorite steakhouse was suddenly always booked. Invitations to networking events dried up. Phone calls went unreturned. New York was a small town when you ran in the right circles. And Dwayne Carroll had just been exiled from all of them. Not because Salvatore Luciano made a single call, though he could have, but because cruelty, when finally witnessed and documented, has consequences. And people who'd tolerated Dwayne's behavior for years suddenly remembered every uncomfortable moment, every off-color joke, every boundary he'd crossed. The dam broke. And Dwayne drowned in the flood. Lillian watched it unfold from a distance. Her emotions a tangled mess she couldn't quite sort through. Guilt came first. Sharp, irrational. The residue of 18 months of being told that everything was somehow her fault. Did I ruin his life? Did I destroy him? She sat in Salvatore's penthouse overlooking Central Park, her hands wrapped around chamomile tea she wasn't drinking, and tried to reconcile the woman she'd become with the woman Dwayne had convinced her she was. He did this to himself, Salvatore said quietly from the doorway, reading her silence like a book he'd memorized. Lillian looked up, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. I know. Logically, I know that. But I still feel responsible. Salvatore crossed the room, kneeling in front of her chair, his hands covering hers. Because he spent a year and a half training you to believe that his actions were your fault, that his anger was your responsibility, that his cruelty was something you provoked. The tears fell. I don't want to be that person anymore, Lillian whispered. The one who apologizes for existing. The one who shrinks to make other people comfortable. I don't want my children growing up watching their mother disappear. Salvatore's grip tightened, his thumb brushing away her tears with devastating gentleness. Then don't. Relief came slowly, like sunrise after a long night. Lillian stopped checking her phone every 5 minutes, waiting for Dwayne's inevitable text. The one that would blame her, gaslight her, make her question whether she'd imagined the whole thing. The text never came. She started sleeping through the night without nightmares. Started eating without counting calories or hearing Dwayne's voice in her head cataloging her failures. Started believing Salvatore when he said she was beautiful, not as a compliment she had to earn, but as a fact he observed. The twins kicked more frequently now, as if sensing their mother's shift from survival to actual living. And Lillian began to understand something fundamental. Healing wasn't linear, but it was possible. 3 weeks after the restaurant, Lillian made a decision. She stood in front of her closet, hands hovering over the loose sweaters and oversized blazers she'd been hiding behind for months. Then she reached for a fitted dress. Navy blue. Elegant. Designed to be seen. Salvatore found her in front of the mirror, one hand on her visible belly, the other adjusting the neckline. "I want to tell people," she said, meeting his eyes in the reflection. "About the pregnancy. About us. I'm tired of hiding like I've done something wrong." Salvatore stepped behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist, his hands covering hers on their children. "You understand what that means," he said carefully. "The attention. The questions. The people who'll have opinions about our relationship, our family, our choices." Lillian nodded. "I spent 18 months making myself invisible to survive Dwayne. I spent the last 5 months making myself invisible to protect our babies." She turned in his arms, her hands finding his face. "But I don't want to live in hiding anymore. I don't want our children's first lesson to be that their mother is ashamed." Salvatore smiled, the real one, the one reserved for moments when Lillian's strength reminded him why he'd fallen in love with her in the first place. "Then we tell the world," he said simply. "Together." That night, Lillian Torres posted a photo to her private Instagram. Her hand intertwined with Salvatore's, both resting on her belly, her engagement ring catching the light. The caption read, "Becoming 3. January 2026. Within an hour, the post had 50 comments. Within 2 hours, her sister was crying on FaceTime. Within 3 hours, her therapist had texted, "So proud of you." And for the first time in years, Lillian Torres wasn't hiding. She was visible. She was loved. She was free. The first time Lillian told her story out loud, her voice shook. It was at brunch with her sister Maria and 2 close friends she'd lost touch with during the Dwayne years. They sat at a corner table in a Soho cafe, sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, and Lillian spoke the truth she'd been carrying in silence for too long. She told them about the weight comments, the isolation, the gaslighting, the 3 a.m. escape. She told them about meeting Salvatore, about healing, about the twins. And when she finished, Maria reached across the table and squeezed her hand so hard it hurt. "I knew something was wrong," Maria whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I knew, but you kept saying you were fine, and You couldn't have known," Lillian interrupted gently. "I didn't even know. That's how abuse works. It convinces you that the prison you're living in is normal." Her friend Rachel, a lawyer with a zero-tolerance policy for cruelty, leaned forward. "And Dwayne? Where is he now?" Lillian smiled, small but genuine, learning that actions have consequences. The table erupted in fierce, protective solidarity. The kind of love Dwayne had systematically stripped away, now flooding back into Lillian's life with overwhelming force. She wasn't alone anymore. And more importantly, she'd never been as weak as he'd convinced her she was. The shift in Salvatore happened gradually, almost imperceptibly. He stopped asking, "Are you okay?" every time Lillian hesitated. He stopped hovering when she left the penthouse alone. He stopped treating her pregnancy like a fragile condition that required constant monitoring. Instead, he asked different questions. "What do you need? What do you want? How can I support you?" He listened when she said she wanted to return to the gallery, even though her due date was 3 months away. He nodded when she said she needed space to process, to rebuild, to become the version of herself she'd lost. He stopped being her protector and became her partner. The difference was subtle but profound. Protection implied vulnerability. Partnership implied equality. And Lillian was done being treated like something fragile. The nursery came together piece by piece, each decision a small act of reclamation. Lillian chose soft gray walls instead of traditional pastels. Salvatore assembled cribs at 2 a.m., cursing in Italian when the instructions made no sense, while Lillian sat in the rocking chair and laughed until her sides hurt. They debated names over takeout Chinese food, writing possibilities on napkins and crossing out the ones that didn't feel right. Marco, Sophia, Alessandro, Elena. What about honoring your grandmother? Salvatore suggested, sweet and sour chicken forgotten. Lillian's eyes softened. Rosa. Her name was Rosa. Rosa Luciano, Salvatore tested, rolling the syllables. Beautiful. They landed on Rosa and Matteo. Names that carried history, strength, legacy. Names that said you are loved before you even arrive. The quiet moments were the ones Lillian treasured most. Sunday mornings, Salvatore's hand on her belly, feeling the twins kick like they were already trying to break free. Late nights, curled on the couch watching old movies, Salvatore's arm around her shoulders, his voice low and steady as he talked about everything and nothing. Afternoons in Central Park, Lillian walking slowly, Salvatore matching her pace without complaint, their fingers intertwined. Ordinary moments. Domestic moments. The kind of moments Dwayne had weaponized, using her need for simple affection as leverage, as proof of her dependence, as ammunition for his cruelty. But with Salvatore, these moments were just love. Uncomplicated. Undemanding. Unconditional. One evening, 3 weeks before her due date, Lillian stood in front of the nursery window, watching the sun set over Manhattan. Salvatore appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked quietly. "How different my life could have been," Lillian admitted. "If I'd stayed. If I'd believed him when he said I couldn't survive without him. If I'd never left." Salvatore's arms tightened. "But you did leave. You survived. You rebuilt." "Because I had help," Lillian said, turning in his arms. "Because I had therapy and Maria and eventually you. But what about the women who don't? The ones still living in that apartment at 3 a.m., too scared to pack a bag?" Salvatore cupped her face, his dark eyes fierce and certain. "Then we help them. We use our resources, our platform, our story. We make sure they know that leaving is possible. That healing is possible. That men like Dwayne Carroll don't get to win." Lillian's eyes filled with tears, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that she'd found someone who didn't just love her, but believed in her capacity to change the world. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you," Salvatore replied, kissing her forehead with devastating tenderness. "And I promise you, Lillian Torres, no one will ever speak to you like that again." It wasn't a threat. It was a vow. And Lillian believed him. January 15th, 2026. 2 weeks before the twins' arrival. Sunlight poured through the nursery windows, painting everything in shades of gold and warmth. Lillian stood in the center of the room, one hand resting on her belly, the other tracing the edge of the oak crib Salvatore had assembled with surprising patience and creative Italian profanity. The twins were restless today, kicking, rolling, reminding her that they were running out of space and ready to meet the world. Rosa kicked left. Matteo answered on the right. A conversation between siblings who hadn't been born yet. Lillian smiled, pressing gently where Matteo's tiny foot pushed against her skin. "Your dad says you're going to be trouble," she whispered. "I think he's right." Behind her, the nursery door opened quietly. Salvatore leaned against the doorframe, still in his work clothes. Charcoal suit, white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from running an empire, but his eyes softened the moment they landed on Lillian. "Talking to them again?" he asked, stepping inside. "They're good listeners," Lillian replied, turning to face him. "Better than most adults." Salvatore crossed the room, his hands finding her waist, pulling her close despite the considerable belly between them. "What are you telling them?" "That they're loved. That they're safe. That their mother is stronger than she ever thought possible." Salvatore's expression shifted. Pride, love, something deeper that didn't have a name. He dropped to his knees slowly, reverently, his hands cradling her belly like it held the entire universe. Which, in many ways, it did. Rosa kicked against his palm. Matteo followed half a second later. "There they are," Salvatore murmured, pressing his forehead against Lillian's stomach. "My fighters." Lillian's hand found his hair, fingers threading through the dark strands as emotion swelled in her chest, so intense it was almost painful. This moment, this man, this life. 6 months ago, she'd been hiding her pregnancy, terrified of being seen, convinced that visibility meant vulnerability. Now she stood in a nursery flooded with light, carrying twins who kicked with their father's stubborn determination and their mother's quiet resilience. "I need to tell them something," Salvatore said quietly, his voice muffled against her belly. "Can I?" "Always." Salvatore lifted his head slightly, his hands still protective, anchoring. "Rosa." "Matteo." His voice was steady, certain, the same voice that commanded rooms and negotiated empires. "Your mother is the strongest person I've ever met. Not because she never broke, but because she rebuilt herself when someone tried to destroy her." Lillian's breath caught. "You're going to grow up watching her take up space unapologetically. You're going to learn from her that survival is not the same as living. That strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up." He paused, emotion thickening his voice. "And you need to know this. Real power isn't about control. It's not about making people small so you can feel big. Real power protects. Real strength defends. Real love makes space for the people you care about to become who they're meant to be." Salvatore kissed her belly. Once, twice, 3 times. Then he stood, pulling Lillian into his arms, holding her like she was the answer to a question he'd spent his whole life asking. "You gave me this," he whispered into her hair. "A family. A future. A reason to use everything I've built for something that actually matters." Lillian pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "You gave me my life back," she replied. "You reminded me that I was worth protecting, that I deserved softness, that the voice in my head telling me I was broken was a liar." They stood like that for a long time. 2 people who'd found each other in the aftermath of different kinds of violence, building something new from the wreckage. Outside, Manhattan hummed with its usual chaos. Sirens, traffic, 8 million people living their separate, intersecting lives. But inside this nursery, there was only peace, only possibility, only the quiet, revolutionary act of choosing healing over revenge, love over bitterness, visibility over hiding. Lillian Torres had reclaimed her dignity. She'd exposed the abuse that had nearly destroyed her. She'd found justice, not through violence, but through the simple, radical act of refusing to disappear. And in 2 weeks, when Rosa and Matteo Luciano entered the world, they would inherit a legacy neither parent had been given. The knowledge that they were wanted, that they were safe. That love, real love, didn't come with conditions or cruelty. Salvatore pressed one final kiss to Lillian's forehead, his hand never leaving her belly. "No one," he said quietly, fiercely, the promise he'd made weeks ago returning like a prayer, "will ever speak to you like that again." And as the twins kicked in agreement, as the sun set over a city that never slept, as two people who'd survived their own kinds of darkness prepared to bring new light into the world, Lillian Torres finally, completely, believed him. Thanks for watching till the very end. If this story moved you, hit like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. I'll be dropping another unforgettable story tomorrow, so make sure you don't miss it.